Hi everybody. We live in a world full of online maps such as Google Maps, but most maps will end up in print, a report, journal, or book. Printing a map involves special requirements. Most designers are familiar with these issues, but many GIS users are not. There are many ways to represent color. They're called color models. Every color model has something called a gamut, which is the range of colors it can reproduce. Two color models are of interest here, RGB and CMYK. RGB stands for red, green, blue, and it's how all screens, computers, phones, TVs, display color. These devices use three colors of light to create a full range of colors. The RGB color model has an extremely wide gamut. It can reproduce every color visible to humans, including some very vivid colors. Most computer software that lets you apply color to things uses the RGB model. This includes QGIS and all Microsoft programs. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, and it's how printing presses create colors. These are the four colors of ink used on a press. Instead of putting solid colors of ink on the paper, a pattern of dots called a halftone is used for each ink color. These dots are printed at different sizes and angles, and your eye blends the dots together to see a wide range of color. Here's how it works. And here's a close-up of the dots. The CMYK color model has a limited gamut compared to RGB. This means that some colors won't print with the same intensity as how they look on the screen. In order to work with the CMYK model, you need to use graphic software such as Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, or Inkscape. QGIS lets you specify a few colors as CMYK, but there's no way to control the output when exporting the file. Why does this matter? If you're printing a map on a normal desktop printer, you don't need to worry about this issue. You'll get whatever colors the printer is capable of. But if your map is going into something that will be printed on a press, it matters. A lot. Here's why. If you send RGB graphics to a printing company, they will probably reject them. Printing presses are designed to work solely in CMYK. They can't print an RGB image. They might be able to convert the files for you, but there's a really good reason not to do that. You will be surprised by the results, and not in a good way. Here's what I mean. You can see that many of the colors lose their intensity when printed, a lot in some cases. That's because RGB colors are produced by light which travels directly to your eye, while CMYK colors are printed on paper which absorbs some of the ink and travel indirectly from the paper to your eye. Because of this color shift, it's important to control the RGB to CMYK conversion process yourself. There are several ways to do this. Since QGIS does not have the capability to output files in CMYK, we need to find another way to do that. Note, a lot of people have requested this capability in QGIS, so a future release might include it. For these examples, I'll use a simple map that includes shaded relief. Here it is in QGIS. I'll export this map as an image, a PDF, and an SVG file. Converting images. Exporting a map from QGIS as a raster image has some advantages. It's easy to convert to CMYK. You don't have to worry about font problems. And printers will readily accept raster images if they're correctly prepared. The big disadvantage is that you can't make any edits to the map except things like color balance, contrast, and cropping. You can't change or move labels or other features. That being said, exporting as an image can be a practical choice. Several options are available for the CMYK conversion. Note, if you're sending an image to a printer, make sure to export it from QGIS as a TIFF. Most printers will not accept JPEGs. Adobe Photoshop. Converting your exported image to CMYK is easy in Photoshop. It's my preferred method because it's fast and gives you the most control. Here I've opened the exported image in Photoshop. If I go to Image Mode, I can confirm that the image is currently in RGB mode. To convert it to CMYK, change this to CMYK and you're done. Note, to see how the conversion will affect the colors, go to View, Proof Setup, and select Working CMYK, then go back to View, Proof Colors. This will enable CMYK Preview mode, showing you the effects of the CMYK conversion before you do it. You might see some color shifting after the conversion. If it's really extreme, go back to QGIS and choose different colors. Save the file as a TIFF. That's the preferred raster format for most printers. GIMP. If you don't have access to Photoshop, GIMP, which is free, can also do the CMYK conversion. You'll also need 2 additional free things. The first thing you'll need is some ICC color profiles. A color profile is a file that describes how colors are rendered on a given device, such as a computer screen or printing press. You can download these for free from Adobe. The download links are in the video description. Download the file and unzip it. The second thing you need is an application called Cyan, which you can get at cyan.graphics. It's also free. This is both a freestanding program and a GIMP plugin. The freestanding program is a bit complex, but don't worry about it. Once it's downloaded, start up the application and it will automatically install the GIMP plugin. Quit the application and return to GIMP and you'll see a Cyan menu item. Here are the conversion steps. Open the image in GIMP. By itself, GIMP only works in RGB mode. If the image isn't a TIFF, export it in that format and then reopen it. Before we do the conversion, we need to tell GIMP where the color profiles are. Go to GIMP, Preferences, and click on the Color Management tab. For Monitor Profile, select an RGB profile. If you don't know which to select, use Adobe RGB or sRGB. Scroll down to the Soft Proofing section. For the Soft Proofing profile, select a CMYK profile. The print shop can give you advice about this. If you have to guess, pick a US Web Uncoded or SWOP profile. Scroll down to the Preferred Profile section and use the same settings you used above, then click OK. To see how the image will look when it's printed, go to View, Color Management, Proof Colors. You will probably notice some color shifting. Now we're ready to do the conversion. Go to Cyan, Export Image, and the Cyan window will appear. You only need to change one setting here. At the top of the window, set the Output menu to your CMYK profile, in this case US Web Uncoded v2. Go to File Save Image, name the file, and click Save. You're all done. Now you have a CMYK TIFF file to send to the printer. Online converters. If you don't have access to a raster editing program, you can use a free online converter. RGB to CMYK. This website is a quick and easy way to convert images from RGB to CMYK, but it has a 25 megabyte file size limit. If your map uses any raster images such as shaded relief and you exported it as a TIFF, it will probably exceed the size limit and you'll have to use Photoshop or GIMP to do the conversion. Or you can go back to QGIS and export the file as a JPEG and this converter will save it as a TIFF. ImageConvert.org. This is another easy-to-use online converter. Both of these sites can convert RGB TIFFs or JPEGs into CMYK TIFFs. Converting PDFs. There are several ways to convert an exported PDF from RGB to CMYK. Adobe Illustrator. Using Illustrator to convert a PDF from RGB to CMYK is simple. Here I've opened the exported PDF in Illustrator and checked the current color mode by going to File, Document Color Mode. To make the conversion, just change the setting to CMYK. That's it. You might notice some color shifts. To save the file as a print-ready PDF, go to File, Save As. The Save As window will appear. Select Adobe PDF from the Format menu, then choose Press Ready from the top menu. The PDF Options window appears. Click on the Compression tab on the left side and uncheck Compressed Text and Line Art. Most printers request this. Important: the printer may have specific instructions for the PDF settings. Always check with them if possible. If you can't, these settings usually work. Click Save PDF and you're done. Adobe Acrobat. If you have the full version of Adobe Acrobat, not just the free Reader application, you can use it to convert your file to CMYK and also do some other edits. Here are the steps. Open the file in Acrobat. You can make small edits to the text. To do that, go to Edit, Edit Text and Images. Acrobat will prepare the file. To edit text, double-click on it and make the change. Don't get too excited about this. It's a clumsy process and not everything is editable. If you have any serious editing to do, you're better off going back to QGIS or using Illustrator. When you're done, go to File, Save as Other, press Ready PDF. This window will appear. Name the file and click Settings. The Settings window appears. Again, here is where the printer might give you special instructions. If not, use these settings. Click OK, then Save, and you're done. Adobe Photoshop. You can use Photoshop or another imaging editing program such as GIMP to convert a PDF to CMYK, but it will no longer be vector data. This might not be a problem, and you're guaranteed to have a high-resolution image that is print shop friendly. Open the PDF in Photoshop. You will need to do this through Photoshop's Open command or right-click on the PDF file and select Open With. This window will appear. Set the image size to suit and the resolution to 300, then click on the Mode menu and select CMYK. Press OK. Go to Layers, Flatten Image. Save the file as a TIFF and you're done. Every print shop I've ever seen can take files like this with no problems. Online converters. There are several websites that can convert PDFs to CMYK. I consider these to be a last resort since you have the least control over the process, but they work. PDF to CMYK.com. This website converts RGB PDFs to CMYK and keeps them as PDFs. It's easy and quick to use. i2PDF, another quick and easy converter. Converting SVGs. Exporting a map as an SVG has several advantages. The file can be opened in vector software such as Illustrator or Inkscape, which makes it easy to edit. It's easy to convert an SVG file to CMYK in some vector software, but not all. The layer structure of the file will be preserved. Exporting as a PDF flattens the image into a single layer, making editing much more difficult. Note: if you're not going to make any edits to a map once it's exported, there's no reason to use the SVG format. Export it as a PDF instead. A PDF is more likely to export correctly, especially if the QGIS file uses any transparency or blend modes. These effects tend to come through the PDF export process correctly, while exporting a map as an SVG requires adjusting them to restore their intended appearance. If you're not going to edit the map in Illustrator, Inkscape, or something else, don't export it as an SVG. Adobe Illustrator. I always export maps as SVG files and open them in Illustrator to make some additional adjustments, including the CMYK conversion. This process gives me the most control over the result and allows for substantial additional editing in Illustrator, including effects that are difficult or impossible to do in QGIS. Here are the steps of my process. Open the SVG file in Illustrator. Here I've opened the Layers palette. There is a bounding box on each layer. These can cause printing and editing problems, so I delete them. First, I'll get the Direct Selection tool by pressing A and click on an open area to see what layer that is by checking the Active Layer indicator in the Layers palette. It's the Parks layer. Since none of the parks are actually selected, it means I've selected the bounding box for that layer. Since I don't want it, I'll delete it. Then I'll repeat this process for the other layers. Note: it's easy to accidentally delete the shaded relief layer, so lock it first. I'll delete the bottom two layers, Page and Background, since they're empty. I also don't want to keep the original DEM layer, so I'll delete that too. The next step I usually do is to rename the layers to shorten them, but I'll skip that here. I need to restore the Multiply Blend mode that let the relief show through, So I'll unlock the US States layer, select it by clicking to the right of the circle in the Layers palette, and set it to Multiply Blend Mode. See my exporting video for more information about how SVG handles opacity and blending modes. Now to do the RGB to CMYK conversion. This is really easy. If you look at the top of the window, you'll see the tab for the current document. It shows the name of the file, followed by the current color mode. It says RGB/preview. To change to CMYK, go to File, Document Color Mode, and select CMYK Color. That's it. You might notice some color shifts in your file. Once I'm done making any edits, I'll create a new layer and move it to the top of the layer stack. Then I'll draw a box for the final area I want to show and set it to No Fill. I'll make sure all of the layers are unlocked, then I'll select all and go to Object, Clipping Mask, Make. Here's what I get. Finally, I need to save the file in the correct format for a printing press. I usually contact the printing company to see if they have any special requirements, but if you can't do that, follow these steps and you should be okay. The default standard for printing is high-resolution CMYK PDF. Go to File, Save As, and the Save As window will appear. Select Adobe PDF from the Format menu. The Save window will appear. Select Press Ready from the top menu. Click on the Compression tab on the left side and uncheck Compress Text and Line Art. Most printers request this. Leave everything else alone, then click Save PDF and you're done. Using Inkscape. If you don't have Adobe Illustrator and don't feel like paying $30 a month for it, Inkscape is a capable and free alternative, but it has some drawbacks. Unlike Illustrator, Inkscape only works in RGB mode. It can't directly convert files to CMYK. If you're using Inkscape to edit SVG files before saving them as PDFs, there are two options. The hard way. You can use Inkscape in conjunction with another free application called Scribus. This is a publishing program similar to Adobe InDesign. You can use it to create complex multi-page documents such as catalogs and books, and it can also save files as CMYK PDFs. The steps are pretty complicated and don't always work consistently, but it can be done. If you decide to try this, be aware that Inkscape layers with transparency, reduced opacity, or blend modes may not translate correctly when opened in Scribus. There's a guide if you're interested. The link is in the video description. And now the easy way. When you're done editing the file in Inkscape, save it as a PDF and use one of the online converters to change the file to CMYK. This method doesn't give you as much control as the hard way, but it's a lot easier and probably good enough. Note: Affinity Designer can convert vector files to CMYK as easily as Illustrator, and it's about $70. Using Photoshop. As a last resort, Photoshop can open SVG files. This will convert the file to a raster image. See the Converting PDFs/Adobe Photoshop section for the steps. GIMP can also open SVG files. Some final notes about vector images and a few other things. Vector images are great. They are easy to edit and can be enlarged to any size and still remain sharp. This versatility comes at a price. They can cause printing problems. Here are a few things to keep in mind. Beware of transparency. This means that any object or layer that isn't 100% opacity with normal blend mode won't print correctly. Adobe Illustrator has tools for helping with this, but it can still be tricky. I've had jobs rejected several times by a printer because of transparency issues. If you're using Illustrator to prep PDF or SVG files for print, be sure to read the documentation about working with transparency. As a last resort when dealing with transparency, save your SVG file in .ai format, Illustrator, or .pdf, Inkscape, and open it in Photoshop or GIMP. Flatten the file, convert it to CMYK, and save it as a TIFF. Watch your line weights. In QGIS, Illustrator, or Inkscape, it's easy to create lines that are too thin to print correctly. The absolute thinnest line a printing press can print is 0.3 points, which is 0.1 millimeters. That's about the thickness of a human hair. To be safe, don't use any line widths below 0.5 points, which is 0.17 millimeters, and that's still really thin. If you export your map as an image, always use TIFF format. Don't send JPEGs to a printer unless they specifically request it. It's now possible to save a CMYK image as a JPEG, but it's difficult and most printers still won't accept it. Use TIFF instead. Check out my designer's guide to creating great maps at themapguide.net/guide and download 2 free chapters. That's all for now. See you next time.